In 2022, Kevin Hart sold 15% of his media company for $100 million, a deal that valued the whole thing at $650 million, and turned a stand-up comedian into a genuine Hollywood mogul overnight. 4 years later, his own employees were reportedly calling it the beginning of the end. Layoffs, executives walking out, and projects quietly dying. And yet Kevin Hart is doing better than ever, because the most valuable thing he owns was never the company. Let's get into how he built his massive Hollywood empire in the middle of catastrophe. Chapter 1. The $650 million mogul move. Let's rewind back to April of 2022 at the exact moment Kevin Hart stopped being talent and tried to become a titan. Here's what he did. He took his two existing businesses, Heartbeat Productions, his film and TV company, and Laugh Out Loud, his digital comedy network, and merged them into a single entity under one banner, Heartbeat. And then he went and raised serious institutional money. A private equity firm called Abry Partners put $100 million into the new company for a 15% stake. Do that math backwards, and it means Heartbeat was valued at $650 million, which meant Kevin Hart's remaining 85%, the piece he still controlled, was worth around $550 million on paper. A guy who used to sell shoes in Philadelphia now owned $500 million of a media company with his own name on the door. And the timing was deliberate, because he was following a very specific playbook. Reese Witherspoon had just sold her production company, Hello Sunshine, at a $900 million valuation. LeBron James had raised money for Spring Hill at $725 million. The entire industry had decided that celebrity-owned media companies were the future, and Wall Street was writing enormous checks to prove it. Kevin Hart looked at that and thought, I've been the guy in front of the camera for 20 years, and the guy who owns the camera always makes more. So he stopped renting his career out and went and built the studio. On paper, in 2022, it worked perfectly. Heartbeat had more than 70 projects in development, deals with Netflix, Peacock, SiriusXM, and Audible, and a stated mission to become the biggest comedy company on Earth. Kevin Hart had officially arrived as a mogul. But to understand why that transformation mattered so much to him, why owning the thing was practically an obsession, you have to go back about 25 years, to a skinny kid in North Philadelphia getting booed off a stage and hit with a piece of fried chicken. Chapter 2. Booed off stage and hit with a piece of chicken. Kevin Darnell Hart was born in July of 1979 and grew up in one of the roughest stretches of North Philadelphia, in a one-bedroom apartment he shared with his mother, Nancy, and his older brother, Robert. His father, Henry, was almost entirely absent, a man deep in the grip of cocaine addiction who spent most of Kevin's childhood cycling in and out of jail. And the details of that are genuinely brutal. His dad broke into his mother's house to steal money. He robbed his own son's barbershop, Kevin's brother's business, and crashed his car. Kevin has been open about the fact that watching addiction destroy his family up close is precisely why he's never touched drugs in his life. On stage, he'd eventually turn all of it into comedy, telling stories about his father showing up to spelling bees high, treating an elementary school competition like it was a championship fight. But the reality underneath the jokes was a house that had been genuinely hollowed out. And holding all of it together was Nancy. She was a systems analyst at the University of Pennsylvania, and she ran her son's life with military precision, planning every hour of his day, checking his homework, quizzing him afterward to make sure he hadn't rushed it. Kevin credits his entire work ethic to her, and there's one detail about her that tells you everything. When he finally decided to chase comedy, she agreed to pay his rent for a year so he could focus. And she hid the rent checks, 6 months' worth, inside a Bible. Her son had to open the good book to find his rent. That's a mother getting two things done at once. But here's the part that gets left out of the highlight reel. Kevin Hart was not good at first. He was bad. He got booed off the stage at Philadelphia's Laugh House repeatedly. Somebody once threw a piece of chicken at him mid-set. He tells a story about a joke dying so hard that an older woman in the crowd cracking crab legs just went, "Oh no." And he says he'd have rather been booed than heard that much disappointment in a stranger's voice. He was trying to imitate other comedians, chasing whatever shtick was working for someone else, and audiences could smell it. So he did the only thing he knew how to do, and it's the single most important decision of his entire career. Speaking of a comic who kept climbing back on that stage after every brutal night, a lot of it comes down to how the brain performs when it matters. That's the idea behind an audio series called The Genius Switch. It's based on the neuroscience of the flow state, that mode where focus and creativity click at the same time. And the whole routine is just listening with headphones a few minutes a day. It's a one-time $39, less than a single online course, and it's backed by a 90-day money-back guarantee, so you can test it on yourself with nothing to lose. If you're watching on your TV, pause and scan the QR code on screen with your phone camera, or tap the first link in the description. Now, back to Kevin Hart and the promise he made himself after those Philadelphia nights. Chapter 3. The Grind That Became the Brand. He decided that if he wasn't going to be the most naturally gifted comedian in the room, he was going to be the one who worked harder than everybody in the building. And that decision is the actual foundation of everything you're about to see. Picture the schedule. He'd leave Philadelphia in the afternoon, hitching rides or catching a bus into New York City to get on stage at the clubs and get home around 4 in the morning. Then do it again. And here's the thing about how he builds material. He doesn't sit down and write jokes on paper. He walks on stage with a premise and finds the joke live, in front of people, over and over, night after night. He said it takes him a year or a year and a half to build a single hour of material that way. Most people would call that inefficient. Kevin Hart calls it the only way it works, because a joke that got polished in a notebook doesn't sound like a person talking. It sounds like homework. And then he did the thing that made him different from every other comedian of his generation. He stopped selling his pain and started owning it. His father's addiction, his own insecurities, his height, his failures, he turned all of it into product. His 2011 special was literally called Laugh at My Pain. He wasn't performing material. He was monetizing his own biography. And that turned out to be a business model because material you own is material nobody can take from you. But the price of that grind was steep, and this is the part of the story that'll get you. In January of 2007, his mother Nancy died of ovarian cancer, and she had hidden the diagnosis from him. She knew he'd just landed a role in a movie. She knew his career was finally cracking open, and she deliberately kept her own cancer a secret so it wouldn't derail him. He didn't find out until a few weeks before she died. The woman who hid his rent money in a Bible hid her own terminal illness for the same reason, to keep him moving forward. She never got to see any of what came next. And what came next was one of the most commercially dominant runs any comedian has ever had. Chapter 4. The Box Office Machine and the 26-Acre Compound. Through the 2000s, Kevin Hart became something the industry hadn't really seen. A stand-up comedian who was also a reliable, bankable, tentpole movie star. The run speaks for itself. Ride Along, Central Intelligence, Get Hard, Night School, and then Jumanji. Welcome to the Jungle, which became a genuine global blockbuster. His films have collectively pulled in billions of dollars at the worldwide box office, and in a strong touring year, reports put his personal earnings somewhere in the $50 to $60 million range. But notice what he was doing quietly underneath the acting career. He founded Heartbeat Productions back in 2009, which meant that by 2018, when Night School came out, he wasn't just the guy in the movie. He was one of the people who owned the movie. The transition from talent to owner started a full decade before that headline-grabbing valuation. And the money bought exactly what you'd expect. Kevin Hart lives in a custom-built Spanish-style villa in Calabasas, California. And the way he got it is a story in itself. After his previous home in Tarzana was burglarized in 2016, with reportedly over $500,000 in clothes and jewelry taken, he decided he wanted maximum security and maximum space. So he bought one of the last remaining open lots in all of Calabasas, 26 acres, purchased through a series of LLCs so nobody would know it was him, for around $1.33 million, and then spent millions more building a roughly 9,600 square foot house on it. Pool with a waterfall, full spa, stocked gym, volleyball courts, and a garage of about 1,000 square feet for the cars. And then, because 26 acres apparently wasn't quite enough, he later picked up the neighboring property for a reported $7 million, pushing his footprint to something like 42 acres. Those cars, by the way, are a genuine obsession, a collection reported at more than 20 vehicles, heavy on both modern exotics and American muscle. Ferraris, a Mercedes SLS AMG, an Aston Martin Vanquish, a 69 Camaro, a 67 Mustang, a 66 GTO. And that obsession nearly killed him, which we'll come back to. Because while the movie career was printing money, Kevin Hart had figured out something more important: that a movie paycheck is still just a paycheck. To build real wealth, he needed to own products, not roles. And his best swing at that has quietly become one of the most successful celebrity businesses in America. Chapter 5. The tequila that's beating the entire industry. In 2020, Kevin Hart started working on a tequila. And unlike most celebrity liquor plays, he did the one thing that actually matters. He found real operators. He partnered with Juan Domingo Beckman, an 11th-generation tequila producer and the CEO of Jose Cuervo, which is to say, tequila royalty, along with brand executive James Morrissey. The product launched in 2022 as Gran Coramino. And what's happened since is genuinely remarkable. It posted the second fastest sales growth of any new premium tequila in 2 decades, according to industry researchers. To date, it has sold around 3.6 million bottles and generated roughly $200 million in total retail sales. And about $85 million of that came in 2025 alone. It's climbed to number 22 in total tequila sales in America, up from number 31 just a year earlier, in a category with over 3,000 competing brands. But here's the number that makes it genuinely impressive rather than just good. In 2025, total U.S. spirit sales fell by 2.2%. Vodka was down 3%. Tequila and mezcal as a whole were down 4.1%. The entire industry was shrinking as people drank less. And Gran Coramino was climbing the rankings straight through it. It even signed on as the official luxury tequila of the Philadelphia Eagles, which for a kid from North Philly is about as full circle as a business deal gets. And the most telling detail comes from his own partner. Morrissey has said the brand now stands on its own 2 feet, that it doesn't require Kevin out there hosting every consumer event anymore. Think about what that means. Hart built a business that no longer depends on him showing up. That is the actual holy grail of celebrity investing, and almost nobody achieves it. And the tequila isn't the only place he's put money to work. Hart has quietly built out an investment portfolio that spans a bunch of industries: a stake in the heritage sportswear brand Mitchell & Ness, a piece of Rihanna's Savage X Fenty, the wellness tech company Therabody, and the biotech firm Tally Health, alongside a venture arm that's backed companies in water, fitness equipment, and even crypto payments. It's a genuinely diversified spread, and the logic behind it is the same every time: get equity in things other people operate, rather than collecting a fee for showing up. But for every Gran Coramino, there's a bet that goes the other way, and his next big idea burned down in about 24 months. Chapter 6. The 100 restaurant plan that died in 2 years. In 2022, riding high, Kevin Hart launched a fast food chain called Hart House. And the ambition was enormous. The concept was smart on paper. Hart had switched to a mostly plant-based diet in 2020, and he teamed up with Andy Hooper, the former president of the Ann pizza chain, to build an entirely vegan fast food brand: plant-based burgers, chicken sandwiches, nuggets, oat milkshakes, all of it priced to compete with regular fast food with sandwiches under $8. The first location opened near LAX in August of 2022, and the stated plan was to open 100 locations in 5 years. 100. He wasn't building a restaurant. He was trying to build the next major American chain. And to his real credit, he tried to do it the right way. Hart House deliberately paid above the going rate with generous health coverage and employee benefits, an attempt to fix the labor model that fast food is famous for exploiting. It got genuine buzz, too. The enormously influential food reviewer Keith Lee visited in 2023 and gave it a rave, praising the price and calling the sandwich amazing. And then, on September 10, 2024, all 4 locations closed. Simultaneously, without warning. The company posted a photo of stacked burgers with the word "thank you" on it and called it a heartfelt goodbye for now. 2 years, 4 stores, and a 100-location dream that never got past 4% of the way there. Industry analysts pointed at a few things. California's minimum wage jumping from $15.50 to $20 an hour, which hits hardest when you've already chosen to pay above market, and a plant-based sector that had gotten badly oversaturated. But one market analyst put his finger on the real lesson. Star power brought visibility, and visibility isn't the same thing as repeat customers. Kevin Hart's fame could get you through the door once. It couldn't make you come back every Tuesday. And that exact lesson was about to play out again on a much bigger stage. Chapter 7. The Empire That Shrank. Now for the honest part of this story, because a video about Kevin Hart's Hollywood empire that skipped the last 2 years would be lying to you. Remember that $650 million valuation from 2022? It was built on an assumption that streaming services would keep spending money on content at the insane pace they'd set during the streaming wars. That assumption broke. Hollywood contracted hard, the streamers pulled back, and the celebrity production company boom went cold across the entire industry, and Heartbeat got caught in it. In November of 2024, the company laid off nearly 20 employees, reportedly around a quarter of its entire workforce. More cuts followed, hitting scripted TV, marketing, social media, brand partnerships, and the podcast division. Another round of roughly a dozen people went in December of 2025. Projects stalled or died. A barbershop television adaptation stopped moving. A second season of one of his animated shows got shelved. Podcasts that had been pitched never launched. The leadership churn was just as rough. Ty Randolph, the CEO, who actually engineered that $100 million raise, left in 2023. Her successor was gone by 2024, alongside the company's chief financial officer and chief content officer. And then in January of 2026, Hart made a deal that set off alarm bells inside his own building. He struck a partnership with Authentic Brands Group, the conglomerate that manages the names and likenesses of Shaquille O'Neal, David Beckham, Marilyn Monroe, and Elvis. Hart licensed his own name, image, and likeness to them in exchange for cash and an equity stake in ABG. His endorsement business moved under their control, and reporting indicated he used the proceeds to start buying out Abry Partners, the private equity firm, and take back control of his own company. In May of 2026, Bloomberg published an investigation laying all of this out, and it landed hard. Anonymous current and former employees described strategic disarray, an increasingly absent boss, and a company in retreat. Some reportedly called the ABG deal the beginning of the end. Now, Kevin Hart went on The Breakfast Club later that month and pushed back forcefully, calling the reporting clickbait and exaggerated. Heartbeat is never going anywhere, he said, pointing out his executive team and creatives were still in place, that a touring comedian and working actor is naturally going to be out of the office, and that plenty of employees had stories about being supported through hard times, including the pandemic. Both things can be true. The company genuinely contracted, and the obituaries being written for it are premature. But buried inside that ABG deal is the detail that explains this entire video. Chapter 8. The asset was always him. Look closely at what Kevin Hart actually sold to Authentic Brands Group. Not the studio, not the film library, not the production slate. He licensed his name, image, and likeness, and got paid cash plus equity in a global brand portfolio for it. That's the whole thesis of his career in one transaction. Every venture he's built has been an experiment in the same question. What is a famous person actually worth? Hart House was the answer when the name gets attached to a brutally hard business with thin margins. It failed. Heartbeat was the answer when the name gets attached to an industry that suddenly stops spending. It shrank. Grand Coramino was the answer when the name gets attached to genuine experts making a genuinely good product. It exploded to $200 million in sales and now runs without him. 3 ventures, 3 completely different outcomes, and one constant sitting underneath all of them: the name. The company was never the empire. Kevin Hart was the empire, and the companies were just different ways of monetizing him. And you can trace that asset all the way back to a bus ride. Because what he's actually been building since he was getting booed off a stage in Philadelphia isn't a film library or a restaurant chain. It's a level of public trust and recognition so durable that a conglomerate that manages Elvis and Marilyn Monroe wants a piece of it. He nearly lost it all too. In September of 2019, he was a passenger in his own 1970 Plymouth Barracuda when it went off Mulholland Highway and rolled down an embankment. He suffered 3 spinal fractures. By some accounts, a quarter of a centimeter in a different direction, and he'd have been paralyzed. 10 days in the hospital, then a live-in rehab facility. He later told Joe Rogan that the biggest cry of his life came the first day he got home. And then, of course, he took that too, and put it on stage, and made it funny. So here's the real shape of Kevin Hart's Hollywood empire, worth somewhere in the neighborhood of $450 million. A 26-acre compound with a neighboring estate attached. 20-plus cars. A tequila brand outgrowing an entire shrinking industry. A production company that got humbled and restructured. A failed burger chain he closed without flinching. And underneath every bit of it, the same engine that's been running since a woman in Philadelphia hid rent checks in a Bible to keep her son chasing something stupid. Relentless, unglamorous, unstoppable work. Kevin Hart's genius was never that he was the funniest guy in the room. It's that he understood, earlier than almost anyone, that if you make yourself the product never gets canceled. If stories about how the biggest names turn fame into empires they actually own are what brought you here, subscribe to Black Status, and we'll keep delivering them. See you in the next one.